Fingalta, and we're finally back with another video. I know I haven't been posting weekly like I said I would, but you know, it's the holidays and I didn't see you posting YouTube videos for me to enjoy. That wasn't funny. But in any case, we're back and discussing the beautiful, amazing craft of writing. So, on first glance, you may think that this is an entirely innocuous video. But it isn't. You may have seen other videos that were like, oh, this YouTuber's favorite writing rules and best rules for writing a novel if it's your first time. But no, this video is going to be completely different. Mostly completely different. Probably mostly completely different. But I've always thought that me being a writing YouTuber has to throw his hat in the ring at one point or another. So here's my video about the 7 quick tips that I believe are some of the most important when it comes to quick starting your novel. Now, are these all the important rules when it comes to new writers writing new books? No, absolutely not. If I were to cover every single writing rule that a new writer should know, then this video would be days long. So I think I've narrowed it down to 7, in no particular order. Please note, if you do want to start a book, there are other resources for, doing that, so I would recommend you check those out as well, as soon as you're done watching this video, of course. Before we begin, I would just like to say that if you enjoyed the video, a like and a comment would be greatly appreciated, and be sure to smash that subscribe button if you don't want to miss another video like this one. So, it's surprising how many people nowadays lack a basic knowledge of the most fundamental rules of writing. I think as the quality of our entertainment goes down, so do our expectations. You see, if you're trained up on bad media, you might not be able to spot a good story when you see one. Where still, you might just be able to enjoy literally anything. And don't get me wrong, that's not a problem, per se. I enjoyed The Rings of Power when many did not. I can do that because it's America. However, there's a difference between saying, I liked Rings of Power and The Rings of Power was good. Because The Rings of Power wasn't exactly good.
Oh my goodness!
From a writing standpoint, The Rings of Power was no masterpiece. In the end, whether or not you enjoyed a movie or TV show could just come down to the fact that it has one of your favorite actors in it. Maybe you were one of those people who watched The Witcher only because you liked the video games. If you enjoyed it, or if you didn't, it's not the best show on the planet. But there's a deeply rooted human desire to actually have stories that make sense. So I hope you're listening, Kathleen Kennedy, because I'm about to give you my 7 tips. Tip number 1. Establish strong character motivation early on. Everyone in your story should have motive. From the bumbling sidekick to the kick-butt protagonist to the evil antagonist, everyone in your story needs to have motivation. This is the key to writing believable characters. What's that, Jimmy? You want 10 bucks? Pfft, you're just gonna spend it on a drink. What's that, Larry? You want 10 bucks to give to the poor? Oh, that's a noble cause. Here, let me get out my wallet. You're more likely to give 10 bucks to your local charity than you are to your drinking buddy.
Or else.
So try to go with some basic human motivations. You know, greed, vengeance, honor, these kinds of things that we understand just by reading your book. You know, greed, vengeance, honor, things that are so intrinsic to the human psyche. Or in other words, so understandable. That is, if you want the reader to care about them. It should be simple, clear-cut, and well-defined what each character's motivation is. There are no meaningful exceptions to this rule that I know, except when you're going for things like comedy. But in comedy, you deliberately break your craft so that you can make the audience laugh, so I guess be that as it may. So be sure to establish strong character motivation early on so that your reader cares what's about to happen to them. Tip number 2. Follow a basic plot structure. I am a proud pantser. That sounds wrong, but it just means I don't use outlines. Usually, I try not to write all the life out of my story by outlining it completely. But that's just me. If you're a discovery writer or pantser, then you might not want an outline either. But in any case, you're probably going to want to follow some kind of basic plot structure. There's your 3-act structure, there's your 4-act structure, there's your Freytag's pyramid, there's a lot of different plot structures out there. But I think a quotation from Jerry Jenkins would actually do really good here. Step 1. Plunge your hero into terrible trouble as soon as possible. Step 2. Everything he or she does to get out of said trouble only makes it worse. Step 3. Everything seems lost as a character suffers a major defeat. Step 4. The character rises from the ashes of his or her defeat and defeats the villain. That's a pretty simple structure, but all it does is basically just follow the main 3 points of a story, which are introduction, climax, and resolution. Make sure you're following some kind of 3 or 4 act structure, some kind of established story or plot structure. It's literally worked for thousands of years. It'll work for you. Tip number 3, read, and then read some more. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but it's very, very important. What kind of director would you be if you never watched movies? What kind of cook would you be if you never ate food? What kind of writer would you be if you never read books? Simply put, you as the reader is what eventually becomes you as the writer, given time. And reading. Just half an hour of recreational reading every night can go a long way. But if you want to be able to write novels, you've got to read novels, so get on it. Tip number 4, don't worry as much on your first draft. Look, we're all human, we all make mistakes. Your first draft is going to be full of them. But that's just a reality you have to accept instead of something that you try to avoid. In order to create an actually good novel, you have to go back on the decent bedrock and then edit a giant house out of it. We'll get to editing later on. But for now, write with reckless abandon. You can always come back and edit it later. In fact, you will. Tip number 5, develop your villain as much as you do your hero. A lot of stories out there with amateurish writing fall into the problem of underdeveloped villain syndrome. But this just happens when there hasn't been enough time spent on developing a villain. It's all too easy to see the villain as an obstacle or a plot device, just something for the hero to get over. I said in my video about villains, which is a great video, you should probably watch it, that the secret to writing a good villain is not writing them as a plot device, but as writing them as a normal human character, with believable wants, desires, goals, and, most importantly, motivations. And your hero or heroine cannot be compelling unless he or she has someone compelling to fight against. With that in mind, you should spend as much time developing your villain as you do your hero. Writing hot tip, focus on a believable motivation for your villain. Tip number 6, avoid throat clearing and most expository dialogue. Writing good dialogue is a skill a writer gets with time, but probably the most important thing I could tell you when it comes in regards to good dialogue is that you just need to avoid being on the nose, basically. You don't have to write William Shakespeare's Crispin's Day speech. You don't need to do that. All it needs to do is be passable. The last thing you want to do is to have the quality of your dialogue distract from what's happening in the story. The most important thing is that you're focusing on your dialogue sounding like 2 human beings talking. If it doesn't, then you failed. Gold star. But certain mannerisms like, "Oh, hi Jane, how's it going? Oh, not bad. You know, I took a trip to the dentist yesterday." We don't care about Jane's trip to the dentist. Just get to the point. It makes your characters look like idiots, and by extension, you. So avoid throat clearing and most expository dialogue. Tip number 7, edit your work. A lot. I've once heard it said that editing is like going back through your story and making it look as if you've had it all figured out from the first page. Which is true. Your first draft is probably going to be a rambled, confused mess. It is the greatest and most necessary of writing sins. Even best-selling authors admit to having terrible first drafts. So don't feel bad about having a bad first draft, okay? That's the first step. The second step is doing something about it. There are 3 parts to a best-selling story: a serviceable idea, decent writing, and a stellar editing job. The thing about editing, though, is that you can change 1 and 2. The goal with editing is just to have the story achieve its final form.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Some of you will actually just have one book and they rewrite it a bunch of times until it's really good. But because your work is not perfect, and in fact far from it, you've got a heck of an editing job on your hands. This is honestly no simple task, and in fact it is the hardest task of all writing. Editing is just going back through the list and figuring out which things are broken that need to be fixed and which things are smaller that need to be made bigger. And through multiple repeated edits, you'll just eventually make the story way better than what it was in its first draft. Because it's not just a matter of fixing things, you also have to make things better. Sometimes you'll rewrite or unwrite parts of the story to make it better. Sometimes you'll add things, although that's more rare. But whatever you do, you've got to edit like a maniac. You've got to work out all those plot holes and inconsistencies and boring characters and replace them with good characters. And what's the opposite of a plot hole? Who cares? You get my point. You need to be good at editing. I know there are more rules out there that I could give someone for starting their first novel, but these are some pretty important ones. I might release another video like this in the future, but who knows? I guess we'll leave that up to time and chance. But anyway, guys, that is it for the video, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please drop a like and maybe comment in the comment section down below. But in any case, I remain Van Galta, and I'll see you in the next video.